The great oceans of our world, which cover more than two-thirds of its surface, hold a timeless power. They are the cradle of life, yet they also possess an immense and unforgiving force. For centuries, humanity has ventured across these vast blue expanses, driven by exploration, driven by trade, driven by the simple desire to connect distant shores. We will bear witness to some of the most profound and catastrophic maritime disasters of the last century and more. These are not merely stories of sunken vessels, they are chronicles of human ambition meeting the raw, untamable power of nature. We will explore the staggering scale of human loss, where thousands of lives were extinguished in moments, leaving behind echoes of sorrow that still resonate. We shall also consider the environmental scars left upon the marine world, and the crucial, often painful lessons that have emerged from the depths. Each wreck tells a story of heroism, of tragedy, and of the enduring struggle between our technological prowess and the elemental forces we seek to command. It is a story of how, in the face of disaster, we are forced to learn, to adapt, and to remember the fragility of our own existence. So I invite you now to join me. Let us journey together into the heart of these historical moments, not with morbid curiosity, but with a sense of solemn respect. Let us reflect on the profound power and the deep, abiding unpredictability of the sea, and honor the memories of those who were lost to its embrace. The ocean remembers, and it is a history that we too must never forget. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, the North Atlantic was a canvas of serene, starlit darkness and chillingly calm waters. Here, on her maiden voyage, sailed the RMS Titanic, a magnificent testament to human ingenuity and industrial pride. She was hailed as a titan of the seas, a vessel so grand and so technologically advanced that she was declared with hubris to be practically unsinkable. On board, more than 2,200 souls, a microcosm of society, from the wealthiest industrialists to the most hopeful of immigrants, shared a collective dream of a new world and a new beginning. The fateful encounter was with an iceberg, a colossal shard of ancient ice that had drifted silently south from the glaciers of Greenland. The collision was described by survivors not as a cataclysmic crash, but as a subtle, jarring shudder that ran through the colossal frame of the ship. The wound it inflicted, however, was mortal. Below the waterline, the steel plates buckled and the icy Atlantic began its relentless ingress, flooding one watertight compartment after another. The unsinkable dream was beginning to founder, and a desperate race against time had begun on the slanting decks. The tragedy that unfolded was not just one of a sinking ship, but of human error and unpreparedness. The lifeboats, tragically insufficient in number for all aboard, were launched half-empty into the freezing water. The night was filled with the sounds of a vessel in its death throes, and the cries of those left behind. When the great ship finally broke apart and plunged into the abyss, more than 1,500 people were lost to the hypothermic waters. The legacy of the Titanic is one of enduring fascination and profound sadness, a permanent reminder that even our greatest achievements remain subject to the laws of nature. Christmas is a time of homecoming, of families reuniting in celebration. In the Philippines, on the 20th of December 1987, the inter-island ferry, the MV Donapaz, was laden with this festive spirit. Thousands of passengers, far exceeding the vessel's official capacity, were crowded aboard, eager to reach their loved ones. They were voyaging through the Tabla Strait, a busy shipping lane, under the cloak of night. The sea was calm, the mood was joyous, but an unseen danger was fast approaching. Suddenly, a catastrophic collision shattered the night. The Donapaz struck the MT vector. MT Vector carried over 8,800 barrels of gasoline and petroleum products. The impact was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The tanker's cargo erupted into a monstrous fireball, engulfing both vessels in a sea of flames. The water itself became a blazing inferno. For the thousands trapped on the ferry, there was no escape. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming the overcrowded decks. The vessel became a floating pyre. The scale of the loss is almost incomprehensible. Trapped between the fire and the burning sea, survival chances were infinitesimal. Rescue efforts were hampered by darkness and horror. When the final toll was counted, an estimated over 4,300 people had perished. It remains the deadliest maritime disaster of peacetime, caused by overcrowding, a lack of proper watchkeeping, the volatile cargo that turned a simple collision into a holocaust. The Donapaz is a harrowing testament to the devastating consequences when safety is sacrificed for profit. The Baltic Sea on the night of September 28, 1994, was churning with a gathering storm. The roll-on, roll-off ferry Mississippi Estonia was making its scheduled overnight crossing from Tallinn to Stockholm. On board were 989 people, a mix of holidaymakers and commuters, entrusting their safety to this modern and seemingly robust vessel. As the ship ventured into open water, it met the full force of the storm. Waves, some reaching over 6 meters in height, relentlessly battered the ship's bow. Inside, passengers tried to sleep, largely unaware of the immense stress being placed upon the vessel's structure. The critical failure point was the bow visor, the large door that lifted to allow vehicles to drive on and off. Under the immense and repeated pressure of the storm waves, its locking mechanisms failed. The entire 55-ton steel visor was torn from its hinges and lost to the sea, taking the loading ramp with it. This created a gaping maw at the front of the ship. A torrent of seawater began to pour directly onto the vehicle deck, a vast open space with no internal bulkheads to slow the ingress. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The ship developed a severe list to starboard with terrifying speed. Within minutes it was on its side, rendering escape from the lower cabins nearly impossible. Panic ensued in the dark, tilting corridors. The ship sank in less than an hour, plunging into the cold 10°C water. Of the 989 people on board, only 137 survived the initial capsizing and the brutal conditions that followed. 852 lives were lost. The sinking of the MS Estonia sent shockwaves across the world, leading to a fundamental reassessment of roll-on, roll-off ferry design and stringent new safety regulations. By 1915, the First World War had transformed the Atlantic Ocean into a deadly theater of conflict. It was here that the German U-boats prowled, enforcing a blockade around the British Isles. Despite the declared risks, the magnificent British ocean liner, RMS Lusitania, prepared for its 202nd transatlantic crossing from New York to Liverpool. She was a marvel of her time, a holder of the blue ribbon for the fastest crossing, a symbol of civilian luxury. On the afternoon of May 7th, off the southern coast of Ireland, the German submarine U-20 spotted the four-funneled silhouette of the Lusitania. Without warning, a single torpedo was fired. It struck the liner on the starboard side, directly beneath the bridge. The initial explosion was immediately followed by a second, much larger and more violent detonation from within the ship's hull. The secondary blast caused the Lusitania to list dramatically and take on water at an alarming rate. The ship sank in a mere 18 minutes. Launching lifeboats became chaotic and often lethal. Of the 1,962 people on board, 1,198 perished, including 128 American citizens. The sinking caused a storm of international outrage, particularly in the United States. While not the sole cause, the immense loss of civilian life on the Lusitania played a significant role in turning public opinion against Germany, contributing to the eventual decision for the United States to enter the war. In April of 1865, the American Civil War had just drawn to its bloody conclusion. Thousands of Union soldiers, freed from the horrors of Confederate prison camps, were desperate to return home. The paddle-wheel steamboat, the SS Sultana, was chartered by the U.S. government to transport these men north along the mighty Mississippi River. The vessel had a legal capacity of just 376 passengers and crew, but in a scheme born of greed, corrupt army officers were paid a kickback for every soldier they placed on board. The Sultana left Vicksburg dangerously, criminally, overcrowded with over 2,100 people. The ship was already in a precarious state. One of its 4 boilers had a leak, and had been hastily and inadequately patched, just before the final leg of the journey. As the Sultana steamed north against the powerful spring current of the Mississippi, which was swollen with floodwaters, immense pressure was placed on its engines and the fragile boilers. In the dead of night, at around 2 a.m. on April 27th near Memphis, Tennessee, the inevitable happened. 3 of the 4 boilers exploded in a titanic blast. The explosion tore through the center of the ship, instantly killing hundreds and hurling others into the dark, cold river. The remains of the Sultana were quickly engulfed in flames. For those who survived the initial blast, a new ordeal began in the churning, debris-filled water. An estimated 1,168 people died, more than on the Titanic. Yet, overshadowed by the assassination of Abraham Lincoln just days earlier, the story of the SS Sultana became a forgotten footnote, the worst maritime disaster in United States history. On the West African coast, the sea is a vital lifeline connecting communities. For the people of southern Senegal, the state-owned ferry, the MV Joola, was an essential link to the capital, Dakar. On September 26, 2002, the ferry departed from the port of Ziguinchor for its overnight journey. The ship, designed to carry around 580 people, was carrying an estimated 2,000 passengers, more than 3 times its limit. As the ferry sailed into the night off the coast of the Gambia, it encountered a storm. Severe overloading drastically affected its stability. Rough seas worsened conditions, a fatal mix. A strong gust of wind and a powerful wave struck the vessel, and in a matter of moments the unthinkable occurred. The MV Joola capsized, rolling completely over in less than 5 minutes. The speed of the event was terrifying, trapping the vast majority of passengers inside the hull with absolutely no chance to escape. The tragedy was compounded by a slow and disorganized response. It was hours before the scale of the disaster was understood and a rescue operation was mounted. By then, it was far too late for most. Fishermen in the area were the first on the scene, pulling a handful of survivors from the water who had managed to climb onto the overturned hull. In the end, only 64 people survived. With an official death toll of 1,863, the sinking of the Joola stands as one of the deadliest civilian maritime disasters of the modern era. The SS Doria, launched in 1951, a floating masterpiece of Italian design, a symbol of post-war national pride. On the evening of July 25, 1956, nearing the end of her voyage from Genoa to New York, carrying over 1,700 passengers and crew. As she approached the coast of Nantucket, Massachusetts, she entered a thick, soupy patch of fog. At the same time, the smaller Swedish-American liner, Mississippi Stockholm, was steaming eastward from New York. The 2 ships were on a collision course. Each ship was equipped with radar, and each was aware of the other's presence. However, a fatal series of misinterpretations and questionable decisions unfolded in the fog. Instead of passing safely, they turned directly towards one another in the final moments. The Stockholm, with its ice-strengthened bow, acted like a battering ram, plowing deep into the starboard side of the Doria. While the initial collision directly killed 46 people on the Doria, what followed was one of the most remarkable and successful maritime rescue operations in history. The Italian liner, though mortally wounded, remained afloat for 11 hours. In a dramatic nighttime operation, over 1,600 people were transferred to safety. The slow, graceful sinking of the beautiful Doria the next morning was captured in iconic photographs, a testament to both tragic error and incredible heroism. In the bitter winter of January 1945, the Second World War in Europe was reaching its brutal endgame. The Soviet Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east, pushing into German territory in what is now Poland. This triggered a massive German naval evacuation, Operation Hannibal. The former cruise ship, the MV Wilhelm Gustloff, was pressed into service. Originally built to carry fewer than 2,000 people, on January 30th it left the port of Gdynia, crammed with an estimated 10,500 refugees. Many were women and children, and there were also military personnel aboard. The ship was a beacon of hope in a sea of chaos, but it sailed into submarine-infested waters of the Baltic Sea. That night, the Soviet submarine S-13, commanded by Alexander Marinesko, spotted the dimly lit vessel. Seeing military personnel and anti-aircraft guns, Marinesko ordered fire. 3 torpedoes struck in quick succession, sealing its fate. First, a torpedo hit the bow, trapping crew who might have organized an evacuation. Second, one exploded under the ship's swimming pool, where many women and children were quartered. Third, a torpedo struck the engine room, cutting all power and plunging the ship into darkness. The vessel listed and sank in under an hour. The freezing water offered no mercy. Rescue efforts were heroic but woefully inadequate. It's estimated over 9,400 people died, making Wilhelm Gustloff the deadliest maritime disaster in recorded history. The Costa Concordia was a giant of the modern cruise industry, a floating resort, dazzling lights, endless entertainment. On the night of January 13, 2012, with more than 4,200 people aboard, it departed from Civitavecchia, Italy. The ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, decided to deviate from the planned course. He ordered a sail-past salute, risky, unauthorized maneuver. To bring the colossal ship close to the island of Giglio as a favor to a crew member whose family lived there, it was a decision driven by vanity, not by prudent navigation. In the darkness, the 114,000-ton vessel sailed too close to the island's rocky shore. The ship struck an underwater reef that was clearly marked on nautical charts, tearing a 50-meter gash in the portside hull. Water began to flood the engine rooms, causing a blackout and the loss of propulsion. Initially, the crew and captain downplayed the severity of the situation, delaying the order to abandon ship for over an hour. As the ship drifted and listed precariously, a chaotic and confused evacuation began, hampered by the severe angle of the vessel and a breakdown in command. The ship eventually came to rest on its side in shallow water, half submerged just meters from the shore. The image of the stricken giant lying on its side became a global symbol of incompetence and irresponsibility. In the chaos, 32 people lost their lives. The captain, who infamously abandoned the ship while passengers were still on board, became a subject of international scorn. The disaster was followed by a monumental and unprecedented salvage operation, a 2-year billion-dollar effort to right and refloat the wreck, a stark and expensive reminder of a tragedy that should never have happened. The daily ferry crossing between Dover, England and Zeebrugge, Belgium, is one of the busiest in the world. On the evening of March 6, 1987, the roll-on, roll-off ferry Herald of Free Enterprise was preparing for its return journey to Dover. It was a cold, clear night, and the port of Zeebrugge was calm. The turnaround was swift, as was typical to maintain a tight schedule. Cars were loaded, lorries were loaded. 459 passengers and 80 crew members settled in for the short trip across the English Channel. A fatal and almost unbelievable oversight had occurred during the hasty departure preparations. The assistant bosun, responsible for closing the massive bow doors, had fallen asleep in his cabin. The officer in charge of checking that the doors were closed failed to do so. With its bow doors wide open to the sea, the Herald of Free Enterprise set sail. The vessel cleared the harbor's protective mole and picked up speed. Water began to pour onto the cavernous vehicle deck. This free surface effect, like the later MS Estonia disaster, sloshed across the open deck and destroyed the ship's stability with astonishing speed. Just 90 seconds after leaving the harbor, the ship began to list sharply. Within 2 minutes it had completely capsized, coming to rest on its side on a sandbar in shallow water. The speed of the capsize created utter pandemonium. Lights failed, the ship was plunged into darkness and flooded with freezing water. The disaster claimed 193 lives. The subsequent inquiry exposed a systemic culture of sloppiness within the ferry company, from the top down. The tragedy led to sweeping changes in ferry design and the implementation of the International Safety Management Code, forcing maritime companies to take direct responsibility for safety. The stories of these 10 ships are etched into our collective memory, solemn monuments to moments when human endeavor was met with catastrophic failure. From the icy waters of the North Atlantic to the warm currents of the Philippines, each wreck speaks of lives cut short, of families torn apart, and of communities forever changed. To remember the Titanic, the Wilhelm Gustloff, the Donapaz, and all the others is not to dwell on disaster, but to acknowledge the profound cost of hubris, negligence, and the unforgiving power of the natural world. These are not just tales of twisted metal on the seafloor, they are vital chapters in the ongoing story of our relationship with the sea. By honoring the victims, we commit to heeding the lessons they have taught us. Every regulation changed, every safety procedure implemented, every design flaw corrected has been written in the ink of these tragedies. The call for improved maritime safety is a continuous one, a responsibility we owe to every soul who has been lost to the waves. We must remain vigilant, remembering that the ocean demands our utmost respect, and that the safety of those who travel upon it is a sacred trust that must never be broken. Our technological advances must always be tempered with humility and a deep understanding of the forces we seek to navigate. These accounts serve as a powerful reminder of our own history and our vulnerabilities. The sea holds countless other stories, tales of discovery, of courage, and of loss that continue to shape our world. I thank you for joining me on this solemn reflection. If you have been moved by these stories, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below and to subscribe for more explorations into the depths of our shared past. For it is in remembering that we find the wisdom to build a safer future.